Okay. So yeah, she'll be given the warning and then a quick little bell at the end.
Okay, and we are recording and we should be live now. So yeah, I think we're good.
Excellent. We'll give it another 3 minutes until start time to give folks a chance to get into the waiting room. I see we've already got quite a few people joining the waiting room, so we'll give a few more minutes and then we'll get moving. I'm just going to quickly, y'all excuse me for a minute, I'm going to go to the slides and add the candidates' contact information to the slide.
Okay.
Did anyone have any final questions or concerns before we roll?
No, all good.
Great. Well, thanks again so much, everybody, for doing this, and we really appreciate it. We had quite a few people expressing interest, so I think it'll be great.
And are you gonna, I didn't hear, Micah, the order of who's gonna answer now that Cinda's not on? Is somebody gonna call out who's next to respond so we're not?
Yes, the person asking the question will give you the order.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I have made a final slide with all of your contact info you shared. And I have a Gmail and a phone number for Jonathan, a Gmail for Claire, email for Marta, and it looks like a website and a phone number. If any of y'all have other things that you want to post onto this, just let me know.
Yeah, I'll put my website on here.
Okay. Great. Yes, and yeah, could the question askers, if you will, quickly introduce yourselves at the beginning. I'll just quickly say your names, those of you who are asking questions, but if you can give just a quick little one-sentence introduction of yourselves as well, that would be great. Thank you for asking that.
I'm gonna go ahead and admit people. Are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. Thank you, Deb. Are we live, Deb? Fantastic, and folks are being
We're good to go.
entered on in. That's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We're just letting everybody in right now out of the waiting room, and so I will go ahead and kick us off. My name is Micah Parkin. I'm Executive Director of 350 Colorado, part of the 350 Boulder County team. Want to welcome everybody, welcome all of our participants, and thanks so much to the candidates who are able to join us tonight, and to everyone who is part of this event and all of the co-sponsoring organizations. So I want to thank everybody who helped with the planning and the outreach. 350 Boulder County, the Lookout Alliance, Colorado Rising, and Clean Energy Action. Thanks everyone for spreading the word. So we're in a historic moment right now during this pandemic, a financial crisis, a climate and planetary crisis. And this is a very difficult time. Many have compared it to the Great Depression or World War II type of time in our lives. And it's also a time with great potential that we can potentially rebuild better. And Boulder, we know, is looked to, Boulder County is looked to as a leader in the nation and across the world. And we want to make sure that we continue to be a beacon for green recovery and a just transition to a more sustainable world. And of course, our leaders are hugely important part of that. And so we are hosting this candidate forum, environmental candidate forum for our Boulder County Commissioner candidates tonight so that people can learn a little bit more about them and ask some questions. All of the candidates have been invited. 3 of the 5 have been able to join us tonight. And I wanted to just give a really quick little reminder about election timeframes. June 30th is the primary, and ballots will go out about 3 weeks before, and you'll have until June 30th to vote. And then November 3rd is going to be the election, and ballots will go out about 3 weeks before, so be sure to be looking out for that, and of course, vote. And wanted to give a quick overview of the agenda tonight. We will start off with 6 questions from the co-sponsoring organizations, and each candidate is encouraged to keep their answers to 2 to 3 minutes. Jenna will be chiming in when you're at 2 minutes to let you know you're at 2 minutes, and then there will be a 3-minute max when a bell will ring. And then we'll move after the 6 different questions and the answers from candidates, we'll move to audience Q&A. And so everyone is welcome and encouraged to submit a question if you would like through the chat. If you've never used the chat function, just move your cursor on the screen, and at the bottom of Zoom, you should see chat. Click on that, and over on the right-hand side, chat should pop up, and you should be able to type your question in there. It will go to the moderator, and the moderators will be choosing the questions. So, and if there are any reporters who are asking questions and have joined us, feel free to also post your questions in the chat and identify yourself as a reporter. And so we're gonna start off tonight with inviting our candidates to introduce themselves. They'll have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and we're gonna go in the following order. We have Claire Levy from District 1, and then District 2, we have Jonathan Singer and Marta Loachamin. And I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anyone's names, please correct me tonight. So we'll go ahead and get started with Claire. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I want to start by thanking the organizations 350 Colorado, the Sierra Club, and the Lookout Alliance for organizing this forum. It's so important, even though we all can't see one another in person, it's still so important for all of us to get to know one another and share our views. The voters are entitled to know who we are and know what we stand for before they cast their ballots. So I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Claire Levy. I recognize many of you from my previous involvement in environmental issues. I ran for the state legislature in 2006, and I was thrilled to get the endorsement of the Sierra Club then. I served for 7 sessions in the state legislature, and each session I got the highest marks from Conservation Colorado, and I was very proud of that record. I have taken the no fossil fuel pledge in this race. Although I've quipped frequently that it was really unnecessary because I don't think any fossil fuel organization would ever think of sending me money because that wouldn't do them any good. I have a record in the legislature and also as a land use attorney for over 20 years of environmental activism. In the legislature, I passed a historic bill to create demand-side management programs. I wrote the country's first solar garden legislation. I wrote the bill that enacted a statewide energy efficiency building code. I also wrote a bill requiring all state buildings to meet a LEED standard or higher. So I have a solid record of environmental leadership in Colorado. I also served on the Joint Budget Committee, and in that capacity, I fought to get more money to the Department of Public Health and Environment so that they could have inspectors to inspect wells. We weren't able to go as far as we wanted to go, but at least we have more inspections now than we did before then. As I mentioned, I was a land use attorney before running for office. I have experience as a land use attorney on local government issues, including growth and development. I've experience in the legislature, serving on the Transportation and Energy Committee and on the Joint Budget Committee. I also have experience as the executive director of a nonprofit organization. So I've managed people, and I've managed a budget, and I've set a vision for leadership. So I'm thrilled to be the only Democratic candidate for District 1. I would love to get the support of all the wonderful environmentalists participating here today, and thank you.
That was exactly time.
Much, Claire. Perfect timing. And next we have Representative Jonathan Singer.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm going to give Jenna a second to restart her clock. And while I'm doing that, I want to say thank you to the organizers today, and also thank you to Jenna for having the toughest job here, which is getting politicians to stop talking. So thank you for doing that. And I also want to thank Claire and Marta for being willing to engage in this democratic process where we have this robust debate and discussion. The first thing that people need to know beyond this group is that we are in a climate crisis. You think the current pandemic is an issue? It's going to be 10 or 100 times worse if we don't immediately address the largest climate change issues we have ever seen with direct, immediate, and aggressive action at every level of government, including our county government. Now, I know the environmental movement has become very popular in the last couple of years, but it wasn't always that way. And so while I can talk to you about my bill that I ran to increase inspections and the budget amendments that I ran at the state legislature to double the number of oil and gas inspectors, or even the first bill I ever ran to make sure that we had alternative fuel vehicles became affordable, not just to people buying those cars, but leasing those cars. I want to tell you that I've been in this movement my entire life. 20 years ago, I was organizing on the ground in my 20s to make sure that open space trust fund dollars weren't eliminated in the state of North Carolina. We won in a conservative state. And I took that same frontline experience when I got frustrated with our current political system to run for office. And just last year, we passed a bill giving local control over oil and gas. Now it's up to our cities and counties to be the standard bearers, to be the champions, to be the people that we need them to be right now, to send a message to our state and our nation that our community is not for sale to the highest or lowest bidder, but it is for the people themselves. I'm honored to be supported by so many different individuals, family farmers, social workers, and I'm honored, and I'd be honored to have your support here today as well. Thank you.
Oh,
Okay,
I just realized I was talking on mute, which doesn't help very much. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And next up, we have Marta Loachamin. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's a little awkward to be talking to my computer for the 13th hour today, but here we are. And it's super important to bring people together about these critical issues. So I want to also say thank you to the organizers. A lot of you I recognize, I've seen you over the last couple of years on the campaign trail. And so to be able to bring everyone together and respond to some of these questions is really important. So I'm going to talk about a couple things. You know, this conversation about environment and climate and sustainability, resiliency work has changed since I filed in November of 2018. And part of that is really this opportunity we have right now when we look at where we are with COVID as another type of disaster. I was super involved in flood recovery work while I was working with the city of Longmont as a resiliency specialist after the flood of 2013. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that now we have the research to show it, that it was the direct effect of the climate crisis that we all live in here. And we felt it and saw it and experienced it here in Boulder County in ways that other folks around, even around our state didn't, because they were disconnected to that. And so to be able to use that lens and that experience, that data assessment from the state was specifically asking 3 years after the flood, what happened to our vulnerable populations when the flood hit in Boulder County specifically. and that data assessment 3 years after the flood for me was an afterthought, and it became really the impetus of why I decided to run for office based on my work in community over the last 28 years in Boulder County. And the other thing I just want to remind our environmentalists from a voting standpoint is that the role of county commission. We only have 3 county commissioners in Boulder County. And so to bring someone like myself who has new perspectives and different relationships is going to be super critical for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marta. Appreciate it. So next up, we have questions from our co-sponsoring organizations. And the first person who's going to be asking a question is Sophie Shivers, and she's with 350 Boulder County and Youth Climate Strike organizer as well. And so I just wanted to invite all the question askers, if you want to quickly introduce yourselves as well before you ask your question, and then give the candidates the order of that you're asking for them to answer the questions. That would be great. Thank you all so much.
Hi, I'm Sophie Shivers. I'm a Niwot High School senior and a member of 350 Boulder, Colorado, and a youth climate strike leader. So this question, the order would be Jonathan Singer, Martha, and then Claire. So Boulder County has declared a climate emergency and sued Suncor and Exxon over climate impacts. As a county commissioner, what specific actions would you take to ensure that Boulder County does its part to achieve net zero GHG emissions by 2038, required for a 66% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and to ensure that public funds are not financing fossil fuel companies or projects?
So, Sophia, thank you so much for asking that question, and thank you for being one of the climate strikers. I was the first lawmaker to call for the release of our climate strikers after they were exercising their First Amendment rights. It caused a lot of consternation, but we got everyone out and we got the charges dropped. And so thank you for being part of that movement. Speaking of that movement, one of the things we need to do is we need to follow the money. When we understand that our commercial banks are in bed with the fossil fuel industry, we need to make sure that we divest on every single level, including giving our counties the option to bank with credit unions and even start their own banking institutions. When we are leveraging our own debt, when we're trying to build infrastructure on the backs of our taxpayers and financing it through people who are giving that money right back to the fossil fuel industry, we need to take a step back and do the right thing. Second of all, we need to make sure our land use code supports taking fossil fuel natural gas hookups out of residential components. And last but not least, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later on, is creating a Boulder County Green New Deal. We need to look at this issue through the lens of workforce development. We need to look at this issue through the lens of equity. And we need to look at this issue through the lens of affordable housing and solid transportation, mass transit. These are the kinds of things that we need to do. We need to think big and drive this from the very beginning and make sure that Boulder County gets the first Green New Deal off the ground, and we can actually start to make sure we change the dialogue in our state and our nation.
So, okay, I'm going to go to the question. I wasn't sure someone was going to say something. So again, my name is Marta Loachamin, candidate for Boulder County Commissioner District 2. And so the question specifically, there's 2 different pieces that I think are super important. Back to, again, this opportunity that we have. One of the things that I've been talking about at 350 Colorado meetings and Sustainable Resilient Longmont, at the City Council chambers, at the Boulder County Commissioner hearings around our climate resolutions, around the moratoriums against fracking, around all these different issues and air quality and land quality pieces that we have, and that Boulder County, frankly, has been doing an amazing job for years in the work to protect our climate and protect us as people. And the other piece is the same question I've asked, and I'm going to ask it again tonight for folks who are online right now and who are in the room on Zoom, is who's not in the room right now? Who have we not engaged? And I believe strongly this is a really big opportunity for us to, and part of that's my teaching background, like this is about kids, this is about our youth, this is about our future, and it's also about our family. And so one of those pieces is how do we bring more people in there? And I am confident, based on my work in community, that I can lead that. And I also believe it's truly important. I've had a conversation with our Boulder County treasurer on really where are those holdups. When we talk about the financing and the investment, it's not just the budget and the money that the county brings in, it's also the 2,000 plus Boulder County employees that commissioners are in charge of. We're supporting, we're managing, and that investment, para, is another piece that we also need to be looking at. So how do we divest? It's also a piece where, for me as a commissioner, that'll be one of my roles, is really influencing, because it's going to be advocating at the state level to make sure that those funds can be divested and that we have opportunities to invest in local banks and invest in a state bank and give opportunities out from those monies.
Should I just start? Okay. All right. Well, it's a great question. I'm glad it's the first question. It's sort of the beginning and the end of the conversation in many ways. So, we need to recognize, I think, first of all, that there are a lot of different sources of greenhouse gas emissions. There's also not going to just be one action or approach that's going to be important. And I've been spending time with this, this document is not going to show up, the climate action document roadmap for Boulder County. And what that tells us is that on average, each resident of this county is currently emitting about 15 metric tons of greenhouse gas equivalents each year. And to meet the targets that we have to get that down to 7 metric tons per person per year. Greenhouse gases come from all different sectors. They come from consumption of energy by buildings and residential and commercial buildings. It comes from our transportation sector. It comes from drilling oil and gas. It comes from the food waste that we dump in the landfill. It comes from landfill in general. And so we have to work on all of these different fronts to address this climate emergency. And emergency is the right word for it, by the way. The question asks about making sure our dollars aren't funding fossil fuel investments. And absolutely, I agree with what's already been said, that we need to divest those funds if they haven't been divested already. The county is doing an inventory of all its buildings and making sure that they're as energy efficient as possible. I support continuing that and doing that robustly. We need to be maximizing use of green energy, clean energy on all county facilities, continue transitioning our fleet towards electric vehicles as quickly as we possibly can. We need to be working on carbon sequestration on not just public lands, but helping through technical assistance all landowners in the county to learn how to use their land to have healthy sources of carbon. We'll stop here.
Fantastic answers, all three of you. Thank you so much. Next question, we're going to have Cynthia Allison from the Lookout Alliance ask this one.
Hi, my name's Cynthia Allison. I'm with the Lookout Alliance, which is a group that was formed because the neighborhood is directly impacted by fracking sites that are being proposed on Boulder County open space. And my question would be first Marta, then Claire, and then Jonathan. Air quality is an issue that affects all Boulder County residents. The Front Range has been classified by the EPA as being in serious non-attainment of ozone standards, and Boulder recently received an F grade from the American Lung Association. Additionally, it is documented that our air quality is adversely affected by oil and gas operations in Weld County, our neighbor to the east. What is one specific action you would take to address the factors that are contributing to the dangerous air quality in Boulder County?
Thank you for that question, Cynthia. So Lookout Alliance, I have had the opportunity to meet and be in the room with that group over the last couple of years as well. And I also, with that group, one of the presenters that I saw speak at 2 different times was Dr. Helmig, who we know that's a big piece of creating the data, showing us the data, giving us true scientific research that I believe, unfortunately, with what's happened with COVID, some of this research is going to stop. Some of these positions, unfortunately, are not going to be replaced right now because of the significant budget cuts. And yet we have now data that shows the issues that we have. And I believe that it's going to take county commissioners like myself to use that information that we already have and not take no for an answer, because I believe that's going to be one of those pieces that we're going to hear later, that we need to wait and we need to do more research again, or we need to start over, or whatever that's going to be. That's just typically how systems work. And so that will be one of the pieces sort of that I am committing to move forward with the data that he's already provided for us and the research that's out there to make sure that we move forward, and also really do the push that we're going to have to do against our neighbor, because unfortunately the air quality is exacerbated in Boulder County because of the fracking in Weld County. So I will absolutely commit, based on being a parent, based on being a previous teacher and a community member, to push for the highest, strictest regulations to protect all of us. And fracking is one of them that we have to say no to.
Oh, so thank you again for the question. And it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's so important, that ozone level violations are a serious public health threat. And it exacerbates people's asthma. It's really dangerous for anybody that has any kind of compromised respiratory system. And it's bad for people. And we need to really get serious about this. The state of Colorado actually has kicked the can down the road repeatedly with seeking exemptions and extension of time to come into compliance. And I'm really pleased that the Polis administration for the first time said, no, you know what, we really don't want you to let us out of these regulations. Hold us to them. We're going to try to meet them. And I think that's the right approach to take. So the question recognizes that air moves across political boundaries, and we can't protect the citizens of Boulder County if we don't take a regional approach. And so, nor can we control the actions of Weld County commissioners. So I think our best option, in addition to limiting, if not prohibiting, fracking in Boulder County and working on our transportation system to reduce the emission of the precursors for ozone, is to continue through CC4CA to push for the strongest possible regulations through the Air Quality Control Commission and at the COGCC. So it's those state entities that can take the action to enact tough regulations and hold the entire Front Range air catchment center area to these tough standards and protect the people that live here. So specifically on transportation, because I didn't get to elaborate on this too much before, we need to be moving to 100% EVs. The county fleet needs to move, but people do as well. And that's going to take support, both at the state, the federal, and the local level for people, so that buying an electric vehicle is a cost-effective option. I know that people can't just buy a new car because they want to. They're going to need help, and the county has played that role in the past through bulk purchasing, and the county can do that again. But aside from transportation, really the biggest factor that's contributing to our non-attainment is oil and gas production. And there's no excuse for that. There's no safe way to do it. I know we're going to have an opportunity to talk about this more further, but there simply is not a safe, environmentally responsible way to get fossil fuels out of the ground. They need to stay there where they belong, and we need to use clean energy.
So I guess last but not least here. So what I wanted to do is I know you asked a question, is what is the one thing that we would do on air quality? And we talked a little bit about the problem, the issue of having more ozone over Boulder Reservoir than we do in downtown Los Angeles. That doesn't happen by accident. And so I don't believe in defeatism and giving up our authority, even when it's Weld County that's polluting our atmosphere and hurting the kids and the lives of our elderly adults, especially in the era of COVID-19. And so I think we need to be smart, but we need to be aggressive on this one. When I fought and won on my co-sponsorship of Senate Bill 181 just last year, we gave a lot of power and control to our local governments. We need to take that bull by the horns. And what that means is we need to step up. And if that means engaging in fining our neighbors to the east of us, then that's what we do. We talk to them and we hold them accountable for the health and the lives that they are affecting every day. That's what I fought for and won at the state capitol. I'm not going to let it go by the wayside here. So what's the one thing that I would do right now? If I could, I'd get Detlef Helmig's job back, because the echoes it's sent through the world of academia right now is chilling. And if we don't have good, solid research, and researchers are afraid to actually do the kind of research that is necessary right now to save the lives of our residents, then everything is lost. So I'm going to work on getting his job back. I've already written to him personally just a few weeks ago, right after I got the news. And then we're going to start working forward and getting real accountability out of our polluting neighbors.
Great. Thank you all so much. The next question is going to come from Gabrielle Katz with the Lookout Alliance. And the order of candidates is Claire, Jonathan, then Marta.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle with the Lookout Alliance, and my question's about fracking, since we're in unincorporated Boulder County. As you're aware, Boulder County is currently threatened with an enormous fracking project called the Crestone Peak CDP. It would include 140 wells between Niwot and Gun Barrel, all of these on county open space. While Boulder County has so far been able to keep out industrial scale oil and gas operations, we really have no permanent solution in place. And many of us are very worried about fracking and the impacts to our health, the environment, open space, and even our property values. 22 organizations representing over 130,000 Boulder County residents have signed a petition calling for a ban on fracking in Boulder County. As a county commissioner, would you work to enact a ban on all new oil and gas operations in Boulder County? Why or why not? Oh, the order is Claire, and then Jonathan, and then Marta.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I believe in my heart of hearts that banning fracking is absolutely the right thing to do. And we've discussed this recently, this issue. I don't know whether that's actually legal or not. And I'm not that call, but I will work as hard as I can to get to that result. If we cannot do it, then, thanks to Senate Bill 181, which was really a historic piece of legislation, then we need to have the strongest regulations possible. Senate Bill 181 changed the entire mission of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission from one that was supposed to facilitate and perpetuate and protect the Oil and Gas Commission production to one that really recognizes the serious public and environmental effects of drilling in Colorado. So the county now has the authority to enact strong and effective regulations that will require drillers not to cause health, safety, or environmental damage. And if those regulations are strong and effective, and I have had a chance to review that draft, then my guess is there's not going to be much drilling in Boulder County, because the fact is that you cannot take methane out of the ground in an environmentally or even public health way, a way that respects the environment and public health. So I would work for the strongest possible regulations. If it's legal for us to just do an outright ban, I guess this is the lawyer in me. If that is legal, then absolutely I would pass that ban. But at a minimum, as I said, we have to have regulations that allow us to say no. This well is not safe. It cannot go here. You haven't taken strong enough protections to protect the water quality, the air quality, the public health and safety of nearby residents.
And thank you for this question. I know this is so important to so many of us. Speaking of signing petitions, I signed the petition back in 2012 to ban fracking in Longmont. That ban was sadly overturned by the courts, and that is why we fought for the last 8 years and won last year to actually give our cities and counties local control over this issue. I'm helping a group right now with Colorado Rising's attorney, Joe Salazar, to make sure that we can reinstate that ban. This isn't just about pushing around the edges and waiting and hoping. This is about working on every single level. I wrote and helped write legislation, and then I sat down and I worked with my community members to make sure that they have what they need to go to court and make the best case possible. And if we win, you can bet that I will copy and paste that everywhere possible, and not just in Boulder County. That's got to be in cities across the county as well, because we can only maintain our unincorporated areas, which is why I'm so thrilled to be endorsed by many of the mayors across Boulder County, whether it's Nederland or Longmont or Boulder, because we have to work across the board. And last but not least, and I think this is important for democracy, you know, I signed a petition in Longmont. We amended our city charter. It's like a constitutional amendment. We need to give that same power and authority to county residents to be able to have that same ability as our cities, our home rule cities already do. And that's one of the things I'll work on as county commissioner, because without democracy and direct democracy, we wouldn't have seen a fracking ban in Longmont. It's thanks to those activists and people signing that petition that we even got as far as we are, and we're in court today. And I want to give those same tools, because fracking is where it starts right now, but that's not the only fossil fuel, and that's not the only fight.
All right, so yes, this question of fracking, there's a couple pieces to it. The impacts are detrimental for all of us, and for all the reasons that were listed above. And what I want to make sure that we're clear about is that communities of color, students, families, workers are the group. We are the most affected. We're barely starting to see some of this research come out again, and some of these conversations again about the historic effects and the disparities. There are also coincidentally damages to our Pachamama, who is our Mother Earth. I have stood with Longmont residents asking for climate action resolutions, and I've testified at hearings with the county commissioners in regards to the moratoriums, and also was really specifically asked the commissioners on 2 occasions to include this eco-justice lens that is so important. And I want to make sure that we remember, again, who is not at the table, and how do we, by bringing more people that I know I can lead us on, as I have for years and years in community in different sectors, because the more people we have that are informed about the disastrous climate effects of fracking and the disaster effects that it leads for all of us, the more support we're going to have, the more people that will be in those rooms, because I want to see our full community represented, not just at the county commissioner hearings, not just at public hearings and city councils, but also with your groups. And I know Sierra Club has a history nationally of really trying to bring in people of color and those most affected, and I want to lead on that work. We have to do that here locally to be able to change some of these decisions. Historically, that is part of who I am in social justice and environmental justice. And so again, that's part of my commitment to make sure that we have a cultural and linguistic community who's also asking for participation in this theme of environmentalism and sustainability. And so I'm going to ask for an extension of the moratorium that our current commissioners are working on right now. But based on all of those other pieces, I will ask for a vote for the commissioners to put forth resources to create a legal path to banning OG operations as soon as I'm elected. That is what we're going to have to do. And hopefully our commissioners are going to continue to use the 181 and really push, but ultimately we need to get to the ban on fracking.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. So our next question, our question number 4 is going to be asked by Ramesh Bhatt, and he's with the Sierra Club.
Thank you, Micah. This is Ramesh Bhatt. Yes, I am with the Sierra Club, and we are very happy to be participating in this event today. My question is the following. Environmental justice addresses issues such as the unfair distribution of the impacts of pollution and climate change, disproportionate burdens associated with the costs of transitioning to renewable energy, as well as inequitable access to the benefits of nature. What do you see as a key environmental justice challenge and opportunity in Boulder County? And how would you address it as a county commissioner? The order is Jonathan, Martha, and then Claire. Thank you.
Ramesh, thank you so much for asking that question as well. I think it is so important. The work that I've done, not only at the legislature, but even before then, is so reflected in that question. One of the things that I took time away from my own campaign to do last year was to actually work regionally, knocking on doors for people living in Commerce City to make sure that their city council, where Suncor is located and poisoning their community, has an opportunity to elect people that will protect them. Because this is not just a local issue, this is a local issue everywhere. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to stop doing that if I'm elected to the county commission. The other thing that I think is incredibly important, and we're working on this bill right now, is to allow local communities to create a system where we fine our polluters and then give those fine dollars directly back to those affected communities. As chair of the Public Healthcare and Human Services Committee, I've spent a huge amount of time working with people of color and disengaged populations that don't think that politicians are standing up for them. And the first thing that I do is I talk to them about how can we work together? Because that's what leadership really should be about, is not standing up there and making a speech like I'm doing right now, but spending time in the communities, asking what they need, and then stepping up. It's called co-governing, and it works. The other thing that I think we can do is we can start to make sure that in a Boulder County Green New Deal, that the people that get these new job opportunities, whether it is in mass transit, whether it is in electrifying our current fossil fuel energy system, whether it is in any of those things, that we give first crack to those frontline communities that are hardest and first hit by our climate crisis, and make that very clear from day one that they are front and center. This has to happen with intentionality, and it's something that I've done before, and it's something that I will do again if elected county commissioner. The other thing that I would mention is that I think it's incredibly important that we work with our local law enforcement and really get them to understand that when people are afraid to go hiking, when they're wearing a mask because they're of a certain color, that we need to have those conversations directly and immediately. People are afraid to go out right now, and it's for a good reason. And as a county commissioner, we can have those conversations with our sheriff's office and law enforcement, not only to provide a security blanket, but really to make sure that every single person here, regardless of their documentation status, is valued and protected.
Thanks for the question. So the question really is like, what's the environmental justice challenge and the opportunity? And I would ask the groups representing this event and the folks watching and the folks watching later to endorse and vote for me to address the top tier equity lens that's missing in Boulder County government right now as one of 3 county commissioners. And there's a piece to the long history that our county has that is connected to disproportionate distribution, the allocation, and the accountability to our community that's connected to the disparity and racial equity and the leadership. And Commissioner's Office, when we look at the very top of our leadership, that's a lens that is missing. And so for us to fund projects and then give them to the people most affected is not really an equity lens. Because if we know, it's basically just keeping that system going, but then we're going to throw you some money on the side. And we see that even in, in some of our other policies. But it doesn't create a system that's really going to help people and make systems more equitable. So I truly believe that as we move along, and based on the work that I did in flood recovery that I mentioned at the beginning, that data study was specifically asking, how are monolingual Spanish speakers throughout our entire county most affected in the flood? And the number one piece that came out of that was trust, a lack of trust with local government, with our institutions and our agencies. And I led that study, created that data for the state, created training materials, and have been working diligently to lift up the voice of cultural brokers throughout our county so that we as community members can become part of the change. And that's really important when we look at the pieces of equity. If we don't know where the equities are, if we don't have folks who look like me, experience life like me, who are perceived like me in the leadership tables, then we don't even know the questions that need to be asked. And we don't know how to create policies that will really support. And so that's what it's going to take. And when we look at COVID and we look at this huge opportunity, we have a blank slate. This is the biggest chance we have in Boulder County to say, you know what? We really do want to address equity, specifically environmental justice and eco-justice. It's all connected to the way that we get access to and provide information about our housing and our transportation. Because again, the more people that are informed about all of these pieces, when we talk about access to the benefits of nature, that's the very beginning piece of this job of county commissioner that is and encompasses the open space and land use. And so how do we inform more people to even know the opportunities so they can be part of, our local experts be part of the planning and the management to create that access. So that is one of the other reasons why your support of me as a person of color in the county to bring that eco-justice lens is critical for all of us now.
Thank you. So the question asks what I see as the key environmental justice challenge in Boulder County and how I would address it. And it's very well documented that adapting to and coping with the effects of global warming are going to be most difficult for low-income people, people of color, people who do not have traditionally political power. As the climate warms, some of us have the luxury of working inside, working in air-conditioned environments, and that is not available to many low-income people who do labor, who do farm labor and construction and things like that. The cost of food is going to go up as our water resources are challenged and as arable land becomes parched and not arable any longer. We're going to have increased health effects. I firmly believe that we would not be experiencing the pandemic from COVID-19 that we're experiencing right now were it not for overpopulation and climate change. And so we're going to see more pandemics. We're going to see more disease vectors such as mosquitoes that are bearing the Zika virus, malaria coming into the United States where we had eradicated it because of global warming. So, and all of these effects are things that lower income people are least able to insulate themselves from. Higher income people, professional class workers, have all of these luxuries and this privilege that other people simply don't have. And so I guess where I'm going with this answer is that we've got to address global warming head on, squarely. It is an emergency, and it is affecting people of color, lower income, disadvantaged communities most strongly. But more directly on the issue of environmental justice, we also need to address income inequality. We need to provide good jobs that are safe jobs, that have environmental protections, occupational safety and health, that come with good health care. We need to have income supports. I support a universal basic income. I have for many years. And addressing income inequality and the fact that we have so many low-wage jobs, which this pandemic, again, is just laying bare as if we didn't already know that. This is putting it right in our faces. The fact that we have these income disparities makes the effects of climate change so much more stark and so much more inequitable. I could not agree more with Marta in saying that we need to actually reach out, we need to involve underserved communities, not as the recipients of the things that we do for them, but in helping us figure out how do we do this and how do we do this together with you, with your voice, with you.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Our next question, question number 5, is going to be asked by Ryan Welsh, and the candidates will answer in the order of Marta, Claire, then Jonathan. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Welsh. I work with Community Cycles Advocacy and was invited tonight by the Lookout Alliance. My question for you is, what do you recommend that Boulder County do to improve its local transportation structure, promote transit ridership, make public transit more affordable, and importantly, encourage alternatives to SOVs or single occupancy vehicles? As a county commissioner, what is one specific thing that you would do to improve our transportation situation? And again, if you could answer first, Marta, followed by Claire, and then Jonathan, that'd be great.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan, for that question. So there's a lot in that question, just like all these other questions too. We know, especially as a District 2 representative of Longmont specifically, 30% of my district here in my city in Longmont looks like me and again feels and experiences life like me. And there are a couple different pieces from my teaching background, being in St. Vrain Valley School District as a teacher. I had this conversation over and over with different classrooms, and I was very surprised that the majority of kids, like literally one student in each of my classrooms, when asked, would say, yeah, I've ridden the bus. And so somehow we have missed a piece of how do we even share out, how do we inform people, how do we really show and create that model? And we've done it better in other parts of the county. So there's something there, like how do we creatively use, we've done it well in other parts. The other piece that's really important, we know that we've put a lot of reliance on RTD and it has failed. And as a county commissioner, to continue pushing on that, on RTD as an agency is going to be super important. And I also don't believe it's the only option. We're going to have to be, again, creative. I've spent time with a lot of different organizations in an advisement role as a consultant, and also with some of my work with Community Foundation Boulder County, specifically doing focus groups with different sectors of the community. And we have some really great programs. And again, Boulder County as an organization, because remember, this is a job of administration, the county commissioner role. And we have a lot of great programs from our housing services that are connected with transportation, et cetera. And we have not done a good job of, one, letting people know about them, and two, going from one town or one city, from mountain community east to west, and replicating or connecting. And that's one of the pieces that to me is super important. From a list of other things that need to be happening in transportation, one of my personal favorite pilot projects that we did here county, but also regionally, and I believe we're going to get into more regional perspectives as we move forward, and especially after COVID, is the Flex Bus. And the Flex Bus originally was a small pilot project, and I used it, my kids used it to get on 287. That infrastructure is already there, and so how do we open? We know that one of our major commute issues is Boulder, Longmont, Longmont, Boulder. And so if we have infrastructure that's already in place, I would like to see that open up to respond to a portion of. And none of these pieces are the silver bullet. If we had a silver bullet, somebody else would have found it already and it would be in place. But all of these different pieces of using creative and fresh perspectives from people who, like myself, I'm from community, I'm a single mother, I've been with teachers, I've been with, those are the voices that are going to open up some new opportunities.
Thank you for the question again. These are all really great questions. They're challenging questions, and I've learned a lot just in putting together my thoughts to try to answer these questions. So, you know, the county has a transportation master plan that it adopted, and I think it actually does provide a really, really good roadmap to how we can decrease reliance on single occupancy vehicles. And the trick is roadmap, a plan into action, and we have to make that a priority. So one thing that the county has been looking at, I believe, and this is something that I have been talking about for a long time, is the fact that if we didn't have to pay those darn fares on the bus, people would just get on the bus more frequently. There are holdups in boarding. You got to scrounge around to make sure you have the money, or you've got to load up your card to get that. I have lived almost the whole time I've been in Boulder that the neighborhood EcoPass program has been around. I've been fortunate to have an EcoPass in my wallet. I never have to worry if I want to just get on the bus. And I think we need to get serious about eliminating fares for RTD in the county. But shoring up RTD is really not going to get us where we need to go because, as Marta said, RTD is failing and it's failing fast. And we need local solutions. Most of the trips in Boulder are between Boulder County communities. There also are a lot of in-commuters from Weld County, from Erie, and points east. And so we need to look regionally at our own independent countywide or regional multi-county transportation district. There's the legal authority to do it. And Boulder residents, I think, would benefit from that. We're sending a whole lot of money to RTD, and we're not getting our money's worth back, and we're not getting the accountability from RTD that we need for that. They're not solving our transportation solutions. But I don't want to put too much emphasis on transit because it simply doesn't work for everybody. And it can't work until we have that first mile, last mile problem solved. And that takes a whole different kind of set of solutions to actually get people to where they can use the bus. We have to make bicycling more accessible and safer for people. We need to widen shoulders. A lot of people, I was just flabbergasted. I was blown away when the US 36 bikeway opened at how many people were commuting. It wasn't just recreational cycling. It was people commuting from Boulder to Louisville to Broomfield, all the way to Denver in many cases. And so we need to have projects like that. I know there's an initiative to do a bikeway from Boulder to Lyons that would sort of parallel US 36. It's things like that that are going to get people out of their cars and allow them to get to work, to do their errands in a different way.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for that question, and leave it to Boulder County Forum when you ask for one thing. And I think I was taking notes. We got more than one. So, and I think both candidates are right. There is no silver bullet solution. And so I'm going to say that a countywide eco-pass system sounds amazing, but we need real accountability out of RTD and fast tracks. I was out there in 2004 gathering signatures for that petition. And to have the script flipped on Boulder County means that we need a loud, consistent voice down at the RTD Board of Directors all the time. On my first day at the Capitol, I showed up at the RTD Board of Directors and I told them when they told me that we were going to get a bus, I said, now is not the time to throw us under the bus. Now is the time to railroad our community. And if you want me to stop using these dad jokes, then just do what you promised. And I think we can actually do something like that if we leverage a countywide eco-pass system to show the interest and the investment. But I'm going to bring up one thing that the other two folks haven't brought up yet. And it's going to sound funny, but it's true. It's affordable housing. We need an affordable housing plan that works regionally across our county to be able to ensure that people can get to and from work and to and from their social activities without having to get into a car in the first place. And this can't only be something for the rich. You know, my landlord doubled my rent 2 years ago, and on a lawmaker's salary, which is about the same as a first-year teacher, I couldn't make it work. And to wonder where I belonged in my own community, if this happens to your state lawmaker, who doesn't it happen to? And so as we're having these regional transportation conversations, if affordable housing isn't a linchpin to that, not just in Boulder, but in Erie and in Lyons and in Louisville and in Longmont, then we can start to develop these hubs and this first mile, last mile issue becomes less of an issue. And this affordable housing issue, which we know is hitting our community harder than almost any other community in the state of Colorado, then we can actually start to move forward on making sure that a countywide eco-pass system would work, or a new regional transportation authority would work, or bringing new ideas to the table. But until we can ensure that people can actually live here, then we're going to continue seeing the same commuter issues that are leading to the same air quality issues that are now overtaking what is happening in traditional electric generation. So, so let's start. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it in the context of environmentalism and make it work.
Excellent. Thank you all so very much. And for our final question, question number 6, that is coming from our co-sponsoring organizations, we have Marguerite Behringer from Clean Energy Action. And the order that the candidates will answer in is Claire, then Jonathan, then Marta.
Hello, folks. My name is Marguerite Behringer. I use she, her pronouns. Obviously, I just got a great introduction. Thank you so much for having me here today. My question for you three is, What is your plan for management of current open space, for the acquisition of more properties, and for protecting these lands from inappropriate uses, such as gas and oil drilling, development in floodplains, and other critical habitat areas, etc.?
So this question is really near and dear to my heart. You'll see the mountain backdrop behind me. We have vistas like that in Boulder County because we had the foresight to buy a lot of land and protect it. Boulder County has over 100,000 acres that are protected from development in one form or another. Some of that is through agricultural land. Some of it is the beautiful open spaces behind me, which the city of Boulder has also participated in preserving. I was so fortunate, actually, about 25 years ago, to serve on the Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee when we were able to preserve both the Hall Ranch and the Heil Ranch and a number of other really significant pieces of property. And that is a testament to the value that people in Boulder place on land preservation. I think from a management point of view, we really have to think about and remember why we buy these lands in the first place. And we buy them to preserve ecosystems. We buy them to preserve wildlife habitat. We don't buy them to create recreational opportunities. It's not a playground. Yes, we want people to access them. Yes, we want people to enjoy their open space that their tax dollars have preserved. But we bought these lands so that we would have these open vistas, so that wildlife would have room to migrate and roam, and so that we would have intact ecosystems. So my primary management objective would be to prevent degradation of open space from overuse. That, I think, is our biggest challenge right now. We are loving these lands to death, and we need to take a management approach that says, you know, these, once it's gone, it's gone. And I spent a lot of time in open space. It's where I go to recharge and rejuvenate. And I see open space that is being eroded by overuse. I see open space that is being overrun by invasive weeds, that is crowding out the natural fauna that our pollinators rely on, that animals rely on, that bring beauty and delight to us. So I would take an approach that puts preservation number one. The question does ask about protecting our lands from inappropriate uses such as oil and gas drilling. Absolutely. The county gets to say no to any use on open space that it doesn't think is appropriate. And oil and gas should be no different. We need to say no. We have the power to say no. That's our land. We bought it, and you cannot foul it by oil and gas development.
I really appreciate this question, and I had no idea that Claire had such a beautiful deck view. I'm gonna have to come over to your house more often. Same thing, Micah, amazing. I don't know how the sun is not set yet, but that's awesome. So this is one of the things that I think is critical to the identity of Boulder County. And Claire put it incredibly well, but I wanna build on that a little bit, because one of the other questions is, well, where else can we invest? What other properties can we buy? There's only one or maybe two right now. And I would say we need to keep an eye towards preserving those lands as soon as possible, because we know that property values continue to go up. At the same time, when we think about our management process, we need to be able to make sure that people can access what we have right now, but we also need to be very careful about overuse, because we cannot afford to stress our open space management system in a time when, unfortunately, we're looking at very serious budget cuts. And I'm going to take a little different twist on this, because I think one of the things we forget about this is not the same as open space, but it's incredibly important, is the agricultural heritage of our community. And one of the things that I've committed to is working on making sure that we have a strong and robust regenerative agriculture, not only pilot program, but really build that out and incentivize those farmers to ethically and responsibly use that land, and then use that land to actually feed people. And use that as not only as a nexus for that, but in a Green New Deal, provide more jobs for people who want to get involved in agriculture. Make sure that people can build tiny homes on agricultural land so they don't have to commute to work. And last but not least, become an educational hub, not only for Boulder County farmers, but for our state. So people can start to see that we don't need to have these dangerous pesticides that are killing our pollinators. And we can work towards not only protecting our open spaces, but also make sure that we are protecting the animals and the insects on it, because they're the literal canaries in this coal mine.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. So, and there's the two parts of that, right? And public land and open space, I'm a runner, so I enjoy getting out there and being part of nature, but also being part of seeing what's happening. I think there's two different pieces when we look at our current open space. And a reminder that the role of Boulder County Commissioner is really administrative. It's overseeing these different departments and also really supporting Boulder County employees. And I think that's one of the pieces when we look at after COVID, how are we going to support employees, the technology use that we're going to be using going forward, how do we be, what I think some of the push is going to be about how do we be more efficient. But there's some other creative ways to allow our own employees to be able to be part of this decision about open space. And when we think about and connect it to the mental health and like how couldn't we, a creative way of letting people be part of those decisions and going out and enjoying open space and really seeing it. Because if we had our 2,000 plus Boulder County employees being part of that process, it welcomes out and it spreads it out, and it also is sharing out that information of how, of the land that we really have, because I think it's a misconception to say that everybody in Boulder County, all 330,000 folks in our population, our residents, are all getting the benefits of this open space. And so we just need to check in again about, okay, if that's not happening, then how could we open up some of those pieces up? I also want to make sure that, again, part of my previous work in a resiliency specialist was also working with Office of Emergency Management and talking about some of this, the preparedness plans that are part directly to this role when we look at preserving our land. And I'm glad that my competitor brought up the piece of agriculture, because when we look at open space, there's also the piece of, as good stewards of the open space and land, we need to make sure that the county is taking care of that land so that it is healthy. Because if we have a farmer that is renting county land that's right next to the land that we're caring for, or maybe not, if it's not healthy, it can affect their crops, it can affect their income sources, it can affect the way that they do business. And that's something that for me is part of transparent and more accountable to the folks in our own community who are really wanting to use land. And just having open space is great, but that's part of it. How do we use that? And we have some of the projects that my competitor is talking about already in pilot forms. So how do we move those forward, and how do we stabilize them and make them more sustainable? Because as you probably all know, only 2% of our agriculture is locally produced. If we don't do something now differently after COVID, then we're going to be even further behind the population.
Thank you all so much for answering the questions from the co-sponsoring organizations. We really appreciate it. The next part of tonight's session is going to be audience questions and answers. And I want to introduce Debra Mcnamara, who is the campaign director for 350 Colorado. And she's been fielding questions. Thank you so much, Deb. And she's going to ask the various questions, and the candidates, we are going to increase, because we had a candidate last minute who wasn't able to join. We have a little bit more time than we thought we had, so we're actually going to increase your answers if you need it to 2 minutes. 2 minutes, yep, for answers per candidate.
That's dangerous.
What's that? Sorry.
Oh, I said that's dangerous, giving us more time.
You'll make good use of it, we know. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and kick that off. Take it away, please, Deb.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So I've received a number of questions both in the chat, and I also received some emails earlier today, and I've tried to group them into themes. So I just want to let everybody know what's coming up in terms of the questions, in case there are some that you want to make sure to be around for. So I'll be asking a follow-up question about your fracking track record. I'll also be asking a question about regenerative agriculture and any plans you might have around promoting that. I had a number of questions about aviation issues and associated pollution, and so there will be a question about that. And then there was another question about divestment. So we'll start with the first question. And actually this is coming from, it's a combined question from Arjun, Ryan, and Jean. And I'll ask the question twice. So what is your record on fracking before you became a candidate? What in your background prepares you to stand up to the big oil companies who want to frack Boulder County? That's part one of the question. And then related, how will you stop these operators, these oil and gas operators, without fighting the state Supreme Court ruling? Ryan and Jean want to know how you're going to completely eliminate the possibility of operators doing business because they feel there's been a lot of talk, but not enough action currently. So actually, let's do Jonathan first, then Marta, and then Claire.
And thank you all three of you for that question. I'm sure it is the #1 issue that I hear about when I knock on doors, or when I used to knock on doors in Longmont, is what are we going to do about oil and gas and fracking? You know, even before I was elected, I signed the petition to ban fracking in Longmont because I knew it was the right thing to do. At the very least, we need to give voters a choice. And even before then, you know, I took strong stands against our fossil fuel industry. You know, in 2004, when I first became a Democrat, I supported Dennis Kucinich for president over John Kerry before the primary was over, because he was standing up against corporate interests like NAFTA, CAFTA, and eventually what we saw with the TPP, which erodes our own local control over oil and gas, over any of our environmental protections as well as labor protections. And with the question about, well, how do we stop operators without fighting the state Supreme Court ruling, or instead of that, I think that, you know, one, you've already heard where I am with our Longmont, what I'm going to do with them. I think the other thing that's important is I am no stranger to being an activist. I helped get the 350, or excuse me, the climate justice advocates released from jail. And not only that, but I'm not afraid to stand in a picket line myself and put myself on that line. It doesn't matter what title I have. I belong out there with every single one of you.
Am I next? No, Marta.
Okay, I was going to ask the same question. Thanks, Claire. So part of the question, so the record on fracking, and then part of the question was about your background. So I am a candidate for Boulder County Commissioner that does not have a legislative background. I've had that question, like, what's your track record? You know, what legislation have you brought here, et cetera? And so it's such a huge opportunity for me as a first-time candidate to represent District 2, because it would be a very unique voice. So in my background, specifically, I started at CU Boulder as a student in '92. And one of the projects I was super involved in as a student activist in social justice and environmental, everything put together, was forming a group of student organizers called the Alliance. In 1994, we ended up, after months of negotiation, of months of conversations, and I tell my students, because I still go back and guest lecture at CU Boulder, I'm like, this was before we had cell phones. This was before the web and the internet. So to bring people together around critical issues of including communities of color, acknowledging history, the contributions that we have put together, and we ended up in a hunger strike to demand an ethnic studies department be built at CU Boulder. And I'm proud that that institution and that department is still there, and we actually have a PhD program, which is very rare. And I share that story with you because that is my commitment to community. That has been my commitment over my whole life, of bringing forth the really important pieces. And again, for me, our Mother Earth is part of us. I come from South America. We are still have civil unrest in other parts of the world. We are still fighting day by day for clean water or against oil companies. And that's part of my life story and part of the work that I do every day, whether it's in an institution or in a school district or the county commissioner's office?
So there's a lot in that question, and I'm going to try to hit on all the different points of it because I think people deserve an answer on each of the points that they've raised. So what's my record before running for office? This is not an issue that I just discovered suddenly when I decided I wanted to be a county commissioner. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I have a record of environmental activism that goes back for the 35 years that I have lived here in Boulder County. The issue of fracking has not been around those 35 years. It's a new technology, but I have been fighting one way or another to preserve our environment and to fight global warming. And fracking is just the latest front in that fight. When I was in the legislature, and I left the legislature in 2013, I supported legislation that Mike Foote brought, that Joe Salazar brought, that I believe Matt Jones brought. I supported that legislation. As I mentioned, I also worked as a member of the Joint Budget Committee to bring more money to CDPHE so that they could actually enforce the weak regulations that we had on the book at the time. And so I think I have a strong environmental record that backs up my resolve to fight fracking. So why should you trust that I'll stand up to these powerful, well-funded interests? Well, I stood up to prosecutors on sentence reform. I stood up to private prison operators to shut down private prisons. I stood up to XL Energy that did not like my Solar Gardens bill one bit. I stood up to XL Energy again to pass demand-side management. So I'm not afraid to take on big fights. I have a track record of doing it. And it requires more than grandstanding. It requires really careful, hard work, detailed work to get to a place where we can actually turn rhetoric into action. As far as fighting the Supreme Court, that ruling was pre-Senate Bill 181. It's a whole new ballgame now. And so I think the issue is still completely right.
Great. Thank you each so much. And I know there was a lot in that question. I'm just doing my best to weave in as many of these questions as possible. So the second question I have for you is from Beverly. Can you please share your thoughts on the Gross Reservoir Expansion Project, the largest construction project ever proposed in Boulder County? What actions will you take? And please share your thoughts on this project. Let's have Marta go first, followed by Claire, and then Jonathan. So Marta, we'll have you start.
Sure, absolutely. So first things first, the Gross Reservoir is still a pending case. There are still lawsuits out there. So as your next District 2 commissioner, I can't say that I would vote in one way or the other because that could truly preclude. And when we have a table of only 3 people, not having somebody be able to participate, and that would be very important. But what I can say in regards to Gross Reservoir is that I believe that going for the 1041 powers or 1041 regulations is that I'm in agreement with it, and that I believe that the county commissioners have made that are making the right decision and in continuing the stop against. So mine's going to be a brief response.
Beverly, thank you for the question. Because I represented House District 13, which included the Western Mountains of Boulder County as well as Grand County, so the other side of the divide, where the project would de-water the Fraser River. It would be just a trickle. It would no longer be worthy of the name river. After this project is done. I oppose it, and I have been on record opposing it for many years. I remember Chris Ware coming to my office, I can't remember how many years ago, but I know I was in the I was in the corner office on the 3rd floor of the Capitol and helping him put together a documentary actually about wasteful water consumption. And that's what Denver Water is actually relying on to build to justify this dam. They don't need to do it. They can conserve water, and the dam is absolutely not supported, and it's not needed. And I think Boulder County is well within their rights in using 1041 authority. I tried to get Governor Hickenlooper to step in with the Department of Natural Resources when he had the power to do that, and he refused to do that. But I think Boulder County, it's going to be up to the county to say no. This is an environmental disaster. It would ruin the quality of life for people up there for many, many, many years during the project. And we can't have the attitude that we're just going to de-water the western slope in order to feed growth on the Front Range. There are limits to the carrying capacity of the water supply. And so we have to keep water in the basin in which that snow fell and the water melted off. We've already perpetrated, this abominable dewatering of the Colorado River where it doesn't even reach the ocean anymore. We just have to say no. We cannot just continue to consume land, to dry up agricultural land for a thirsty Front Range population growth. So I would.
All right.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Jonathan. Thank you.
Yeah, for whom the bell tolls. I'm going to avoid repeating what everyone else has mentioned. I think the county is certainly making the right moves right now to protect our community. That being said, I think we need to talk about this in the broader sense for a minute, and that's the difference between water storage and water conservation. And I think when we start talking about water storage, that fuels unfettered growth. We talk about water conservation, that actually talks about a smart growth approach. And while we're talking about gross reservoir, we need to be also making sure that we are putting in incentives for people when they are building new residential areas or anything else, that we're doing xeriscaping, that we're doing the right thing so we don't even hear about this other demand that's out there right now. And so, yeah, county's moving in the right direction on this one. If I'm elected, I'll keep moving in that direction. But bottom line is, we need to be very cognizant of the fact that we can talk about a better vision. It doesn't have to be this tough anymore. We can talk about a better vision where we talk about conservation over storage and get rid of this scarcity narrative that's making us fight each other right now.
Great, thank you each. And I'm getting the hang of getting the questions in the chat too. So I just put the next question in there from Micah. How might you address the need to fully develop a local regenerative food system in Boulder County, one that sequesters carbon while it feeds the community? And let's have Claire go first this time, followed by Jonathan and then Marta. So if you don't mind, Claire, going first.
I am happy to do that. A local regenerative food system. It's important. We've known this for a long time. Food is healthiest when it's grown closest to home. And there's something nice about knowing your farmer. And regenerative agriculture really speaks to the notion that farming practices shouldn't just deplete the resource. It shouldn't just suck nutrients out of the soil. It shouldn't just take water out of the system. It should all be in a cycle that leaves the land and the soil healthier than it was. So farming practices that are like no-till farming practices, because that don't use as much water. So when you don't till, you don't have to irrigate as much. You don't have as much weed growth, and so you have healthier soils. So there are a lot of farming practices that can be done, which Boulder County is really supporting already. And I would just say more, more to that. We have to keep our agricultural lands healthy, and we also have to think about the challenges that farmers face. I've had conversations with farmers in the county that worry about whether the impatient drivers are honking behind them when they're moving their tractor from one field to another, or the difficulty in getting a building permit out of Boulder County when they need to build a new storage shed for some equipment, or things like that, or people moving to unincorporated Boulder County because we have such beautiful uninterrupted vistas, and then saying, oh, I don't like the odor of cow manure, or I don't like the sound of the tractor that's going at 5 in the morning when it's the best time to be out there. We need to, if this is something we value, then we need to accommodate.
You know, I think that's a wonderful start, actually, and a great way to start this conversation, but I think we need to build on it a little bit more. Simply say that regenerative agriculture is good. We've got pilot programs that are happening here. By the way, I'm glad whoever asked that question, hopefully I spurred you on by talking about it while I was supposed to be talking about open space. So I'm not going to repeat what I said there, but when I say we need to be an innovation hub, that means that we need to be focusing on actual infrastructure. When we see federal dollars coming down that say that you need to spend it by a certain time, when we've seen where previous federal relief packages came down, they said, look, we're going to rebuild infrastructure. Why not build an educational hub? We've got a sugar mill in Longmont that's basically been abandoned at this point. We have other abandoned facilities that maybe had that agricultural heritage. Let's make those hubs, because the number one thing is we want to be able to have best practices for farming, but what about processing? If we're driving too far to go process our whether it's our meat or our food or our fiber, then we're just adding to the problem that we've already had. So when I talk about a Green New Deal, it's not just one thing and it's not one area, but it's really making sure that we are investing in that. When our workforce centers here run by Boulder County have people who are out of work, let's get them work experience in these skilled trades that are still in high demand. And also, last but not least, let's continue the work that we're doing and build on the work that we're doing to give people on food assistance, it used to be called food stamps, access to our farmers markets through discount double bucks. Let's build it out even further. And last but not least, let's make sure these small farmers have some financial security. I know of one farmer that was nearly wiped out after one hailstorm because they can't get farming insurance like our big agribusiness companies. Let's make sure that we make them a priority, call it out, and find ways to create new methods of financial relief and make that investment something that the whole community can enjoy.
So thank you for the question. There's a couple different pieces, I believe, and something I've been talking about specifically on the campaign trail, but also in the work that I've been doing in community around the real need when we talk about local regenerative food system. There's two pieces there. First of all, we need to have a system at the very top that's creating a demand for agricultural and for the food system. So instead of, if we are not as at the institution of Boulder County, if we're not as consumers, if we're not as residents of the population really securing that financial demand, then it really makes it hard for our farmers and our ranchers to know that they're going to have secure economic viability. And so there's different layers in there that we really need to, as a community. And again, after COVID, this is, if we're not going to do now, I've seen a couple of memes talking about, as soon as COVID's over, let's support small businesses, small local businesses. That doesn't make sense, especially from my path as an entrepreneur working with startup and folks who have been giving their all. And so here's an opportunity for us to do that. So I think we really need to look at seriously how we're going to create demand for regenerative agriculture, et cetera. And the other piece was and I'm seeing in the chat, and now there's more stuff in there. So the other piece is really incorporating local experts, because it doesn't make sense. That's not my wheelhouse, but I also know how to lead and collaborate with partnerships and with folks in the community who are. And that's been part of my walk, over years, is finding the people that really, we don't need to do a study and bring people from outside of our communities, because we have local experts. I've spoke with them that have phenomenal ideas and who know our land to be able to really address how the sequestration and give us some input and partner up with us. And the other one is our youth, because this is one of the pieces, again, that we just say again, this is about our kids and making sure that we do these pieces.
Great, thank you each. I know as we're nearing, we have just about 30 minutes left. We're as we're nearing the end. I want to just invite any reporters that happen to be on. If you have a question, to submit that and just note that you're a reporter, and I'll be keeping an eye out for that. So the next question is in the chat, and it is from Barbara, and it is, how can we accomplish the work needed to be done to reduce the impact of climate change, given the financial damage that has happened from COVID-19? And let's go back to Jonathan first, followed by Marta, and then Claire.
Thank you, Barbara, for that question. And I know that's one that comes up a lot. And the first thing that I want to say is there's been irreparable damage that's happened from COVID-19. And if we think this is the worst thing that's happened, just wait until the climate emergency really takes hold and takes effect. And the second thing that I want to say about this is that in the middle of a crisis, this is the time not to put our hand on the brake, but to put our feet to the pedals. We cannot abandon the values that make us Boulder County because of a crisis. We actually need to embrace them. We need to work even harder, and these will actually reduce the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. When I talk about things like Boulder County Green New Deal and making sure that we create a pipeline for real sustainable jobs, that's something that we can continue to build on. Any sort of scarcity model where they're saying there's not enough to go around, that's a right-wing talking point. The federal government bailed out the big banks in 2008 and 2009. They owe us a solid here. And if they're not going to do it, then we need to step up and demand that our federal government do the right thing and create the Green New Deal system that I'm talking about with us. That's why I'm so proud to be endorsed by people like Ed Perlmutter and Congressman Joe Neguse, who are working on these very issues right now. And I know I have their ear. And when we defeat Donald Trump in November, we're going to have a whole new plan and a whole new blueprint and a whole new way of talking about this. And our communities that were most affected by COVID-19 are the same communities that are going to be affected by global climate change. And so this is an opportunity as almost a test balloon to make sure that we're protecting and working with those communities now so we can build that bridge. I'm no stranger to a crisis. When the floods hit in 2013, I was the one that wrote the bills that created the offices that have that new standpoint, and I hope we can continue working on those things.
Thank you. Marta, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Okay, thank you. All right, so question, there's a couple different pieces in here for me when we talk about the reducing the impact of climate change, because one, it's true, we are, and it's gonna, I believe, develop, we are coming into a serious reduction of our state budget, not just now, but in the next few years. And so there's a piece of, we in Boulder County are actually in a better spot than a lot of other counties. We could clearly look over to Weld County when we talk about climate change and climate action. What is one of the things that we can do without having the new resources or new funding, et cetera, is because we have some of these fantastic programs that touch everything truly, from the affordable housing piece and transportation and some of the day-to-day pieces of supporting families who want fresh produce, et cetera. But we have to do a better job of spreading those out. And I think that's one of the really fascinating things about this time during COVID, because I've had some town halls and participated in conversations with folks around the county and other leaders, that we have a lot of this, these infrastructures in place. And now we have an opportunity to use them and make sure that people know, because there's a group of people right now that are feeling similar to what we felt in the mortgage crisis, because my background is housing. A lot of people didn't go get help because of shame or embarrassment, et cetera. And we do have that happening in Boulder County. And so to let people know about some of these programs that we have out there that are already working in the climate action is an opportunity to bring more people into that. And the other piece is the reality that we're going to have an opportunity to also look at the way that we are including more people into the work that we're going to be doing down the road, right, in regards to not just the budgets, but also the programming. And I do believe that bringing more people into that is going to be here in Boulder County.
So the question is, you know, how can we really afford to fight climate change now that we're, you know, I don't know how many $1 trillion once it's all said and done into fighting COVID. That's a different question, is how can we afford not to? The cost of not fighting climate change will absolutely eclipse the cost of fighting it. We save money by not having catastrophic floods like we had in 2013. We save money by not having a fire season that is no longer a season, it's 12 months a year when our firefighters are having to fight wildfires because our forests are too dry and they're unhealthy and they're full of cheatgrass and other really flammable weeds. So we save money by having robust, well-built infrastructure that can withstand the floods that will continue to come. You know, the county is suing Suncor and ExxonMobil and other oil producers because it is costing us too much money to deal with the side effects of climate change. It is costing us money in emergency response. It's costing us money in having to rebuild every single road that came down out of the county, out of the foothills. It's costing us money in higher healthcare expenses because people are getting sicker because of high temperatures. I just reject the premise of the question. It's not too expensive to fight climate change. It's too expensive not to fight it. I guess I would add on to that, though, something that's been alluded to here already, which is that the jobs that we will create in rebuilding our infrastructure, in sequestering carbon back into these wells that hopefully will no longer be producing, the jobs that are created repairing our environment and building a more robust, sustainable infrastructure are good jobs, they're well-paying jobs, and they're not going to go away because we're no longer going to be dependent on a boom-bust industry.
Great, thank you so much. We'll do this question and then we'll see where we're at. I know that we won't get to all of the questions that folks had, and I believe Micah will be sharing contact information so that there can be a continued dialogue after this forum. The next question has to do with aviation impacts, and this came from a number of different people, and so I've combined, it's a long question. I've put the essence of it in the chat, and I'm going to read parts of the question so you can get the idea of what folks are wanting to hear about. And this question came, about 6 or 8 different people asked different variations of this question. So we're hoping that you can expand the scope of this discussion to include another pollution source, specifically air and noise pollution by the aviation industry. So general aviation aircraft are identified as the primary source of lead particulate pollution throughout the US, and Denver metro area has some of the highest concentrations of lead particulate pollution in the country. So aircraft are responsible for noise pollution of both residential and open space areas, and research shows a variety of negative impacts. So a number of residents want to know what you are going to do to address these issues, and most specifically, would you support Representative Negus's proposed bill, Aircraft Noise Reduction Act? And will you actively seek solutions to reduce aviation impacts, including stricter limits on leaded exhaust emissions? And as I said, those questions came from a number of residents, some of whom are with Citizens for Quiet Skies. And let's have Marta go first this time, followed by Claire and then Jonathan.
Great. Yes, that I think is the record for the longest question. So they're not getting longer because the night's getting longer. A couple things. I mean, I think the question in here, 2 pieces. I haven't read Negus's bill on Aircraft Noise Reduction Act, so I can't tell you. I just haven't read it. So part of this job is being able to say, from an administrator standpoint, from a management standpoint, and really from a leadership standpoint, which the job is that I'm not going to have an answer to absolutely everything. And my commitment to be out with community and ask the questions and bring people in what I think is going to be different formats going forward than our normal public hearings is going to be something that I will be working on and that I'm committed to do for each little pocket of our county to make sure that these conversations are heard. So I am aware of the group. I've talked with a couple of those folks, but did not make it to anything before we got into this situation where we're not doing public events, et cetera. So I think the piece for me is really my commitment to use all of these different policies that we have in protection, whether it is a specific lead exhaust emission, or if it's an air quality piece, or if it's water quality, or if it's land, that I will use all of those different regulations and push for more stringent regulations so that we can protect our land quality, our air quality. This particular regulation of noise, I believe we could actually use that when we talk about the fracking conversation. There's all these different layers that we have, and we just need to use them, and I will use all of those in my role of leadership as a Boulder County Commissioner to make sure that we are all protected and all taken care of. So that's my my response, and I'm sure there's something in there that I missed specifically, but remember that the county commissioner is county commissioner, so some of those pieces are outside of our wheelhouse also we can't make decisions for it.
So this question obviously reflects a lot of research and expertise on behalf of the people asking the question. And I've spoken with Kimberly Gibbs a couple of times about the issue of aviation noise. And I know that that's an issue that is really a problem, and not just the noise, the exhaust, the pollution that's coming out of recreational aviation. And then the specter, although it's not in Boulder County, the Front Range Airport down in Broomfield, that could become a general aviation airport. That is a really alarming prospect. Yes, absolutely. As a county commissioner, I would actively support Joe Negus's bill. And I think where this question takes me, I guess, is to the role that we have as commissioners in advocating on behalf of the residents of Boulder County with other layers of government. So Boulder County took the lead in forming Colorado Communities for Climate Action. Boulder County took the lead in forming a sister organization to Colorado Counties, Inc., because CCI was so regressive and controlled by conservative counties. We have a powerful voice at the Capitol. And when commissioners come and testify on behalf of their citizens, I can say as a former elected official that legislators listen, because we're closest to the people and we're bringing real voices to the Capitol. The same goes with Congress. We have an obligation where people don't have any form of representation, for especially people in unincorporated Boulder County. County commissioners are their elected officials. And so we need to put on that advocacy hat, which I am very comfortable wearing. I've worn it for most of my adult life. And we need to advocate at whatever level of government we need to protect the quality of life here in Boulder County.
You know, I'm glad that you brought up the Aircraft Noise Reduction Act. I think it's incredibly important to talk a little bit about what this is, because if you live in West Longmont or Southwest Longmont, you hear the airplanes every day. And when I got reached out to by Citizens for Quiet Skies, I put together a coalition of folks, including people from the governor's office, the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Public Health and Environment, and brought actual members of Citizens for Quiet Skies to the table. And before I even go any further, I just want to say I'm so sorry to those of you who are affected by this. I know this is affecting your physical health, your mental health, not to mention your property values. And this is something that we need to work on every level. And this is so brilliant to talk about the lead impacts, not just the noise abatement issues, but the lead impacts, the immediate and tertiary health impacts of this. His bill, Rep. Negus's bill, made front page news in December. And you know, even though the Longmont Airport CEO is telling me to go pound sand, we haven't let go of this issue. We're still bringing people together. We've brought in Longmont City Council now. This is why it's so important that we elect the right people to every level of government, because we can't just say it's somebody else's problem. It's a federal issue. It's a local issue. It's a state issue. We can't be afraid to pick up the phone, bring people into a room, and have those really tough conversations. And we're not there yet, but they're on notice. And while we may not own the airway or the skyway, we certainly can take advantage of the fact that we own the land under our feet and can take control over that and use that as leverage.
Thank you so much. I think there are a couple more questions. I'm thinking that we should go ahead and move towards closing statements. We want to make sure that you each have plenty of time to offer closing statements. And if you are inspired to touch on any divestment thoughts, that was another question that came up, as well as just how you're going to lead overall systems change in Boulder, and how you're going to get the word out to Boulder residents about the programs that you will enact. If you want to weave those sentiments in, that will touch on a couple of other of the questions that that we didn't get to. So Micah, I'll hand it over to you if you want to say anything else, and then we'll move towards closing.
Sure, and we're realizing, I think, as this has moved forward, just how fast 2 minutes and 1 minute and 3 minutes go. So if you want, why don't we make these, if you need to expand, we had originally said 1 minute. If you want to go to 2 for your closing statements, why don't we do that, just to give a little extra time so you don't feel so crunched. So yeah, we'll go ahead and let's see. Deb, what was the next,
Yeah. If we could have Claire go first, and then Jonathan, and then Marta for the closing statements.
Okay, so I am going to start my closing the way I started my opening, which is by thanking the organizations that brought us together for not letting this be derailed by this terrible pandemic that we're in, because it is still important for all of us to share our views about important issues that face the people of Boulder County. And I can think of nothing more important for the long-term health of the people in this county than environmental issues. I am seeing the participants here dwindle. We went from a high of, I think, 71. Now we're down to 37, which includes those of us speaking. But I'm really honored to have been included in this and have a chance to share my background and my vision for the county. I think at a systems level. When I was the executive director of the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, what we did and what I led that organization towards is thinking about systemic barriers to economic opportunity and access to healthcare. If you can't think at a larger level and see the different pieces that fit together and see those systemic barriers, then you can't make progress. Ultimately, implementing change requires working at both the big visionary level, and because county commissioners actually get to make policy and implement policy, you have to also be able to think at that small-grained implementation level. And through my work as a nonprofit executive director, through my work as an assistant county attorney many years ago, through my work in the legislature, I think I can bring all three of those components together into this job and work for a more progressive Boulder County, a more sustainable Boulder County, and a more inclusive Boulder County. We've touched on this several times, how important it is to bring new voices to the table, because it's going to take all of us, and we cannot ignore the effects that the policies that county commissioners make have on people who don't have access to the levers of power. So I'm committed as a county commissioner to working aggressively to fight climate change, to work on affordable housing so that we have a more inclusive community, to bring new voices to the table with the partners that have access to those voices, to strengthening and building on and nurturing the cultural brokers program that Marta has been so involved in, and making this county or continuing to be the leader that this county is. Boulder County is looked to not just in Colorado and not just in the United States, but it's looked to really throughout the world for leadership. We have this fantastic open space program. We have the climate tax, the energy efficiency tax, the sustainability tax, I guess is what it is. You know, we've been leaders. We've had representatives at the IPGG world forums because we belong at those tables.
Well, I think I'm next, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all
Claire.
right. So, thank you again to the organizers, and thank you again to my counterparts who are running, Marta and Claire, for being here and participating in this process. You know, I'm going to start out by talking about a couple of the things that we didn't really get a chance to talk too much about. The first one is organized labor, and making sure that our organized labor movement is part of the environmental movement. You know, I'm proud to be endorsed by the Working Families Party, the Unite Here organizers, as well as the construction trades. And we're gonna, when we talk about bringing everyone to the table, we need to make sure that those gig economy jobs, if they're not sustainable, move away from them. Let's actually run the programs in our county that can actually change economic viability for people, so people aren't living hand to mouth, and we can tackle the big issues. When we talk about divestment, Emily Sirota, the person I'm mentoring at the State House, is running the para divestment bill. And we can talk about how this is an administrative job, but I don't care how good of an administrator somebody is if you're administering a bad policy. So we need people out there that have a record of results. There's only 3 county commissioners, and I've passed literally dozens, if not over 100 bills, taking on the fossil fuel interests, the gun lobby, and I'm willing to bring that same fight and make it even louder at the Boulder County Commission office, because we have that authority, we have that power, and we have the bully pulpit that we can use to create the next narrative, because it doesn't have to be this hard anymore. I was a social worker working with families in crisis before I started this. The rules of the game weren't written by the people that were most affected by those rules, but I've taken my entire life to change the rules of the game to help the people that need it the most. And I promise to continue doing that if elected to the County Commission, and I'd be honored to have your support. Thank you all for taking your time tonight.
Thank you so much, Jonathan Singer. And last, we have Marta Loachamin.
Thank you. Thanks again to everybody who brought us together, and those who are online, hanging out for an hour and 48 minutes of your evening. So there's a couple different pieces that when we talk about just systems in general, and the Boulder County Commissioner job, again, I look at it from a business perspective because I'm self-employed and I'm from an entrepreneurial world. And the entrepreneurs and a lot of our gig workers, a lot of our independent contractors, et cetera, I'm really empathetic with from a county perspective, because we are the people out there working. We always talk about entrepreneurs. We're the ones who will go work leave our 40-hour jobs so we can go work 80. But it's very real that we don't have benefits. We don't have PTO. We don't have weekends off. We don't have a lot of these structures and retirement accounts and things like that in place. And that's going to be really important as we look at how the workplace changes and evolves. But from a system standpoint, my life has been about systemic change. It has been about everywhere I've been, whether it was in my banking background, in finance, in mortgage, in real estate, has been about asking the really tough questions and institutionalizing change. Claire just mentioned the cultural broker work that I've been involved in from a county perspective that came out of my work with the city of Longmont and resiliency work. Institutionalized, created an opportunity. We went to the Boulder County system and said, the fact that we have very qualified people in our community that don't have bachelor's degrees shouldn't hinder different experiences, different resumes, life experiences, and work outside of what might be that narrow box. And we were successful in changing 81 positions in Boulder County to remove that barrier. Those are the types of changes that create systemic change, that are institutionalized up here at the top and not just other pieces. And I want to share that I've been in the community working with community members who've been affected by all of these policies that have been made at the state level. Was working with community against foreclosure, using the foreclosure hotline years ago after the mortgage crisis. These are some of the pieces that are going to be so important when we look at economic opportunities. And that means giving people jobs that really value them, whether it's our bilingual, bicultural folks, whether it's any other local expert that needs an opportunity. Those conversations have to change. And with only 3 county commissioners, you're right, I don't have the track record of a legislative record. I have a track record of making change dynamically for community members all over Boulder County, and that's my commitment to ensure that all these conversations of affordable housing and climate change, our education, our transportation, are all encompassed with an equity lens to intertwine, truly changing the way that we work together and the way that we lead Boulder County. And it's about our Mother Earth. We know that. That's the loudest conversation out there. We see it, we feel it, and we have an opportunity to use what the Earth has done for us during COVID and maintain that. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much. We appreciate everyone's participation. This was an excellent session tonight. Really great questions from the audience. Wonderful answers from the candidates. We appreciate all of you so very much. Just very quickly, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see how to contact the county commissioner candidates if you have follow-up questions that you would like to ask. They're here on the screen. And of course, this is also being Facebook Live, so there were people joining us via Facebook, and we also are recording this, and we'll have it posted on YouTube, and the various organizations that have been supporting it and co-sponsoring this event tonight will be able to paste this out and send it to their members. So there is their information, and also wanted to, oops, went a little too fast. We also wanted to bring up that our groups are calling, we've all been working together toward protecting Boulder County from fracking. And we have a petition right now out circulating that already has, I believe it's 27 organizations who represent over 130,000 different Boulder County residents who have signed it. And we want to encourage everybody to sign on to that petition if you are so inclined for a ban on fracking in Boulder County. And we have the URL there, and one of those interesting gadgets that most of you probably know how to access on your phones. I could not figure it out, but some of you probably know how to do those sorts of techie things better than I do. And then there also on the right-hand side, you'll see that we have a link to a URL that where you can submit comments to the Boulder County Commissioners calling for the strongest possible regulations of oil and gas operations in the county. So please take those actions if you're so inclined. And finally, if you would like to become more involved with any of the organizations who were co-sponsoring tonight's forum, there are the links to 350 Boulder County, the Lookout Alliance, Sierra Club, the Indian Peaks Group, and Clean Energy Action. And again, thanks to all the co-sponsoring organizations. Thanks again, candidates. We so appreciate you. And it was a great evening. We thank you so much, and we'll look forward to sharing this out with everybody soon. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was great.
Night, everyone.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.